Victims of narcissistic abuse often find their lives in disarray due to the profound psychological impact of their experiences. Watch until then, as I reveal to you 7 reasons why this happens. Let's start with number 1, erosion of self-worth. Have you ever wondered why victims of narcissistic abuse often seem to live in chaos? It's because narcissists know precisely how to destroy their victims' self-worth. They constantly criticize, blame, and belittle, making their victims feel like they can't do anything right. This endless barrage of negativity wears down their self-esteem. When someone feels this way, it's hard to find the motivation to keep their life organized. Imagine being told every day that you're not good enough. It's exhausting and demoralizing. This relentless criticism leaves victims feeling inadequate and unworthy. When you don't feel good about yourself, it's tough to stay motivated. This lack of motivation spills over into every part of their life. They struggle to maintain structure at home and at work. Victims often end up in a state of disarray, not because they are lazy, but because their self-worth has been so deeply damaged. It's a constant uphill battle. So the next time you see someone whose life seems chaotic, remember, they might be dealing with more than meets the eye. Next, chronic stress and anxiety. Have you noticed how victims of narcissistic abuse always seem to be stressed out? It's because they live under constant emotional threat. Narcissists are unpredictable and manipulative, keeping their victims on edge all the time. This constant fear of conflict creates chronic stress and anxiety. Victims are always trying to guess what will happen next to avoid trouble. This ongoing stress is exhausting. It drains their mental and emotional energy. When you're constantly stressed, it's hard to focus on everyday tasks. They end up neglecting personal and household responsibilities. It's not that they don't care, they're just too drained to keep up. Living in this state of perpetual anxiety is incredibly tough. Their minds are always racing, and it takes a huge toll. So if you see someone whose life seems to be falling apart, understand that chronic stress might be the culprit. Now let's talk about number 3, cognitive dissonance. Ever wondered why victims of narcissistic abuse seem so confused? They often deal with something called cognitive dissonance. This means they're trying to balance their love for the abuser with the pain of the abuse. It's a challenging mental conflict to handle. This internal struggle creates a lot of mental confusion. Victims are constantly torn between their feelings and reality. This emotional turmoil is overwhelming. It makes it really hard to focus on daily tasks. Imagine constantly questioning your own feelings and memories. It's mentally exhausting. Because of this, keeping life organized becomes nearly impossible. The chaos in their minds spills over into their everyday lives. They might seem scattered and unfocused. So when you see someone struggling to keep things together, remember, they might be dealing with deep internal conflicts. What about number 4, isolation and lack of support? Ever noticed how victims of narcissistic abuse often seem to be alone? It's because narcissists use isolation as a way to control their victims. They cut them off from friends and family, making them feel isolated and helpless. This lack of support is incredibly damaging. Victims have nobody to turn to for emotional validation or practical help. Imagine feeling completely cut off from everyone who cares about you. It's a lonely and terrifying experience. Without support, managing life becomes a real struggle. When you're dealing with abuse, having someone to talk to can make all the difference. But victims of narcissistic abuse often don't have that luxury. They're left to fend for themselves in a world that feels hostile and uncaring. So the next time you see someone who seems isolated and alone, remember, they might be fighting a battle you can't see. Also, victims of narcissistic abuse often experience this: hypervigilance. Have you ever noticed how victims of narcissistic abuse always seem to be on edge? It's because they're living in a state of hypervigilance, constantly anticipating the next attack. Let's delve into what hypervigilance means and why it's so exhausting. Hypervigilance is like having your alarm system on high alert 24/7. Victims are always scanning their surroundings, looking for signs of danger. This constant state of readiness is a survival mechanism, a way to protect themselves from further harm. Imagine walking through a minefield, never knowing when the next explosion will occur. That's what hypervigilance feels like. Victims are always bracing themselves for impact, never able to fully relax. This perpetual state of alertness consumes a tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy. It leaves victims feeling drained and depleted, with little left to devote to self-care or maintaining a tidy living space. Think of it as running a marathon without ever getting a chance to rest. Eventually, your body and mind start to break down from the constant strain. Victims of narcissistic abuse often find themselves in a similar situation, struggling to keep up with the demands of hypervigilance. So the next time you encounter someone who seems constantly on edge, remember, they might be battling their own internal minefield, one that leaves little room for peace or orderliness. Number 6. Emotional exhaustion. Ever wondered why victims of narcissistic abuse often seem so emotionally drained? It's because they're dealing with a tremendous amount of emotional labor. Narcissists are masters of manipulation, constantly demanding attention and validation. They're unpredictable, with mood swings that keep their victims on their toes. This constant emotional roller coaster takes a toll on the victim's mental and emotional well-being. Imagine having to walk on eggshells every day, never knowing what will set the narcissist off next. It's mentally exhausting. This emotional exhaustion spills over into every aspect of the victim's life. When you're constantly on edge, trying to anticipate and manage someone else's emotions, there's little energy left for anything else. Victims struggle to stay organized and manage their everyday responsibilities. It's like trying to juggle a dozen balls at once with no end in sight. Eventually, something has to give. Victims of narcissistic abuse often find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer weight of emotional exhaustion. So the next time you encounter someone who seems perpetually tired and worn out, remember, they might be carrying a heavy burden that you can't see, one that leaves little room for order or organization in their life. And lastly, trauma responses. Have you ever wondered why victims of narcissistic abuse often seem to struggle with their daily lives? It's because many of them develop trauma responses as a result of their experiences. Trauma responses are the mind and body's way of coping with overwhelming experiences. Victims of narcissistic abuse may develop conditions like PTSD, which can manifest in symptoms such as flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, and emotional numbness. Imagine reliving your worst moments over and over again as if they're happening right now. That's what flashbacks feel like. They're terrifying and disorienting, making it hard to focus on anything else. Intrusive thoughts are like unwanted guests who refuse to leave. They invade your mind when you least expect it, disrupting your thoughts and emotions. It's exhausting trying to push them away all the time. Emotional numbness is a way of shutting down to protect yourself from further pain. It's like going through life in a fog, unable to feel anything. This numbness can make it challenging to engage with the world around you, leading to disarray in both personal and professional life. So the next time you encounter someone who seems to be struggling, remember, they might be battling their own internal demons, ones that make it hard to stay organized and focused. The disarray that often characterizes the lives of narcissistic abuse victims is a direct result of the psychological manipulation and emotional turmoil inflicted by the abuser. Understanding these reasons is essential for offering appropriate support and resources to help victims rebuild their lives and regain a sense of order and stability. If you like narcissism-related content, support this channel by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Until next time, see you in the next video.